Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show, discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Desiree Duffy, and this is Books That Make You. Today, we're talking about books that make you embark on your spiritual writing journey. Now, many of us feel the call to write, especially if we're avid readers. And after discovering our own poignant spiritual path, well, then sometimes we feel this overwhelming mission to put pen to paper, to combine our desire to write with our calling to share a spiritual message with others. What is the spiritual writer's path really like, though? How is it similar to and different from one's spiritual path, from every writer's path? And in either instance, what should writers be aware of along the way? Our guest is Deborah Herman. She is a gifted spiritual teacher who believes that we are here to raise the vibration of others and to live with love, authenticity, and most of all, hope. Now, she is the author of Spiritual Writing from Inspiration to Publication, the second edition. This is a very timely book, and through it, Deborah helps writers to discover their spiritual path. Her book helps spiritual writers answer the big question of which kind of spiritual writer are you? Deborah is a mystic, and because of that, she combines this spiritual writing mission with the writer's path, and she teaches the act of writing to connect people with their higher selves and therefore the source. Deborah is a former literary agent with a top agency, a publisher, and an intuitive writing coach. She is also the best-selling author of 13 books so far and has dedicated her 25-plus year career to publishing and to writer education. Deborah, there's so much going on there. Sorry, I kind of got a little lost for a second there.
I know. It's very easy to do. I do it all the time.
Right. There's so much we can talk about. So I just want to cut right to the chase and tell us about this book, The Spiritual Writer's Path, and get into a little bit of why it's like or not like one's spiritual path.
Wow. I originally wrote the book 20 years ago because I was already teaching writing as a spiritual journey to writers' conferences around the country, and realizing as the audiences grew that it was touching people and resonating with people. They didn't quite understand how to navigate publishing. And at this time, I would overhear other literary agents saying, I don't know what to do with this. All of these really interesting books are, passing over the transom, but there was no real place for them. They were considered, and this is, this was a phrase that is probably still used in some parts, but it was called very woo-woo. Mm-hmm. And, for me, I surround myself with people who speak my language. We'll ask, my sister, for example, is also on a spiritual path. And so we'll start our conversations with, well, how am I doing? Because we both read each other intuitively. And so I was enmeshed with people who already understood. And then I was finding there were a lot of people who felt disenfranchised and unseen. And eventually, a lot of the books became more mainstream. When I first started on awakening to a spiritual path, and I put in the book my very first experience with someone who I realized later was my first spiritual teacher, who just showed me a poem that he had written 2 weeks before he passed away, and just showed it to me, and I read it, and it was all about just understanding yourself and your place in the universe, and it just touched me deeply. It started me on my actual writer's path also, because after he passed away, his wife had me write his eulogy, And it just opened up this whole world for me. So I was early on the path, and I wanted to learn. There were no bookstores dedicated to what then became known as New Age types of books.
Mm-hmm.
And they were referred to as New Age, but they were very old books and old texts. But they were experiencing a renaissance at that time. And I started just going into bookstores and practically having certain books fall on my head
Yeah.
because they were the next step in what I needed to learn.
I love how, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that it's often how it happens with people. It's happening organically, as if there's this subconscious or unseen guidance, and you follow those clues and you follow that path, but you feel very alone. And so one of the reasons I wrote the book and rewrote this book 20 years later with so many changes in my own life and my understanding of publishing and changes in the publishing industry, I wrote that book as to bring us together so that people who were worried about speaking openly about their beliefs, sharing their experiences of what some people call unfoldment and awakening, so that they would know, hey, you're not crazy. This is very real. It may be different from what a lot of people experience as the so-called mainstream, but it doesn't mean it's wrong. And creatives especially are very apt to go in this direction. And
Exactly.
and then you could even feel embarrassed but at least back then, to say this is what I believe and it's so real to me. So I wanted to help people to feel less alone, and also a big part of it was to help them become professional, so that they could share their work.
Absolutely. And I want to talk about the craft and how you actually work with people, because you as a coach do work with people, and how you unpack that in your book. But first, you're talking about this path that people take, and the book's literally falling on your head. And it seems that that is something that people have had happen since we've been human. I mean, there's so many books written over the ages. And I think it's interesting that this, like you call it, a renaissance that occurred because it started to kind of come out of the bookstores again and come into the mainstream again. Can you talk a little bit about what does it feel like, or what do you see? How do you, Deborah, know if somebody is indeed a spiritual writer?
There's almost an energetic connection. Again, I operate a great deal from my intuition. Early on, I had to develop discernment, and to believe and accept my gut feelings. But I can talk to someone and get a sense of their level of authenticity, of their sincerity, of their ego. Some people want to become these big best-selling new thought gurus, but it's all about them. And it's not about bringing us the source into the world to help other people. And whenever you're doing it for it doesn't mean you don't want to be successful. We all want to be successful. We want to be heard. We want to be seen. We want to sell books, but there's that fine line between what is your actual purpose in doing so. Because if you're following the path of the ego, where it's all about you and wanting, and not a healthy ego, where it's all about needing validation, needing attention, needing material recognition, things go wrong eventually, and you feel it. And some people become very, very successful, but are they following their true path, which is for all human beings on a spiritual path is really service to the higher good. So, I look at people and it's like, well, good for you. I'm glad you have your yacht and your bazillion-dollar home and all of that. But is there fulfillment? Maybe, but it's fleeting because you can't take it with you.
Well, and I have to imagine too that some people see this path as being something lucrative. That's one of the temptations, isn't it? It's just something else that's pulling us. So as we're on the spiritual path, and if we feel suddenly that we're being pulled by monetary gains and having, a sense of power and authority over others, then that's a very negative thing. And that's part of one's spiritual path, would you think?
I would not call it negative. I would call it deceiving.
Okay.
Because if it were truly negative, we would maybe be able to perceive it more readily. But the danger is it feels really good because that kind of energy will tell you, you are all that and you are the one and you should, and that's what leads to cults. And it leads to people who take other people off their path and who serve only themselves. And that is a path, but it's not the path that I discuss in the spiritual writing book. I want people to be truly dedicated messengers for what is their destiny. And we all have one. And it could be a small thing. You follow your guidance and you wind up going one place when you thought you were going another place. And there's someone there that needs your help and you do that. And maybe that's your purpose. It doesn't have to be grandiose, but part of this, and the book has what I call the 7 lessons of Soul Odyssey. One of the trickiest lessons for anyone who's going to potentially be visible and rewarded monetarily is the ego lesson. And to remember, are you going to be a messenger or the message? And I just think eventually, if you want to be the message, I just think the universe prevents that in one way or another. And but it's very deceptive because it can appear as an angel of light and then you buy into it and it's almost, and then you have to unravel for all of the mistakes that you make along the way.
And this ties into the big question that your book begs in: what kind of spiritual writer are you? Right?
Yes. It's a very big question. And what I love about the 7 lessons that really came in a download, because I'd been teaching them for many, many years. I didn't know what to call them. I wanted something concrete. I went to law school. In law school, there's this concept of hiding the ball. You're supposed to figure out all these abstract concepts and then, develop an understanding of, well, what is the black letter law? What is the takeaway? How do we build a case based on, the things we extrapolate from a lot of information? So I was like, all right, universe, all right, God, I really need some answers here. And this seemed so logical and so clear that you're not here at random. There are things that you are here to learn in classroom earth. And I felt like it was a gift so that we could, it's not like, at first when I started teaching this on, I had a show that I used to do. And it was like people wanted to go down the list. Well, I'm going to go out now and learn my courage lesson. And it doesn't work like that. The universe creates it between you and the universe. You create the optimal circumstances to progress on your path. And the only benefit of understanding these lessons is to think about your choices and your actions so that you can consciously make changes. It's like, oh no, that happened again. oh, I wonder, it's really getting me in my need for love, my self-love lesson. And then you can, it's like a spiritual therapy almost.
Mm-hmm.
A therapist isn't going to give you answers. They're going to give you enough information for you to find the answers within yourself. And that's really what the 7 lessons of being a spiritual messenger, or for anybody really, but I tie it in with being a writer because writers are powerful. Words are powerful. And those people who feel the calling to write, if they understand and navigate these lessons, they enhance the possibility that the message coming through is a pure message from source.
Yeah.
Then it will reach who it needs to reach, and it will raise vibration.
Mm-hmm.
Other than constantly throwing out fear and throwing out hopelessness, the messages are really meant to give people hope and to help them get past fear into a place of faith, whatever that faith is.
Yes. And your methodology, we can lean over and talk a little bit about craft. You say that you cut down on that spiritual writer's learning curve by almost half. Can you talk about that?
Oh, yeah. Because first of all, you're dealing with awakening and your spirituality. And I front loaded the 7 lessons because of things like the tolerance lesson, where when you suddenly awaken to this new concept of reality, you want to pour it into everybody else's glass. And you need to pull back a little bit. And this is a very important concept for writing a book. If you write only for yourself and you talk at people, your reader's going to be lost. So, tolerance lesson, the what's in it for the reader lesson, very parallel, because a lot of times writers, especially those who write memoir, forget that what is in it for the reader is not the details of every day of your life. People confuse memoir with autobiography. A memoir is intended to be a snapshot of time that follows a through line, a theme, something that people can resonate with and learn about their lives through your experience and your story. And of course, they want to be entertained. You don't want to write. I've seen people write things that could be so exciting and dramatic, and they just say it like in a writing monotone.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm tying in and trying to cut back on the learning curve for the spiritual writer. Number 1, you've got to know who your audience is. And saying it's the entire world proves to me that you're in that kind of ego place where you don't realize that you have a message that may only be for, this amount of people. And that's just as good as anyone else. You don't have to be validated. Some people are reaching more people, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So that's number 1. Try to find your audience. And there are ways to do that today using technology and search engine optimization and keywords that never existed before. First time when I wrote this book before, we did not have even the ability to scan through Amazon so easily to figure out, are there books on my subject already? Who is reading those books? Who are the agents representing those books? Now we have all these websites and, and keyword calculators and all kinds of things that really help you drill down to who is your reader. And then as you're crafting your book and you're organizing it, you need to keep in mind that you're taking your reader on a journey with you, just like you're on a journey. And so you need to organize your writing so that they don't get lost. So, those are two very major craft oriented suggestions that I really stress in the book.
Exactly. And I think that's why it's important to just underscore the fact that your book can work for any writer,
Oh, yeah.
spiritual or otherwise.
Oh, yeah. Well, because I've really spent most of my career, our literary agency is a nonfiction literary agency. And I was curating and going through back when it was all in snail mail. We had stacks and stacks, and I would have to whip through them to see if they followed certain protocols that would be of interest to an agent or a publisher. And there are things that they look at. And so it applies to any writer. The book that I co-authored on book proposals, that's for any writer.
Mm-hmm.
It's geared for nonfiction, but you can extrapolate and use the same format for fiction because it's the same. You're looking to prove something in almost like a business plan, but it's got to be sexier.
Right.
It's got to be sexier, but it's really because you only have a short span of a short period of time for an editor or an agent to look at what you're presenting to them. So any writer, I've put the whole book proposal explanation. One comment from the first edition, and it's because there was so much to cover, was one reader said, I'd really like more examples of how to do the book proposal. So that's in this book now. See, I listen.
Exactly. Yes.
Listen.
Listening is so good. And I think that's just really important to point out because nowadays there are so many different options for writers when it comes to submitting their book. And actually nowadays, most agents are going to say to you, don't snail mail us anything, don't send anything. But I think it's important then to realize that also means that they're getting inundated because it can be so easy to send off an email. So standing out and making that book proposal like you're talking about just really grab their attention. It's even more important nowadays in our digital world than it was back then. So you started talking a little bit about the book proposals and how you cover that in the book and digital marketing and things of that nature. Do you want to continue talking?
Yeah. The protocol, because people are inundated, you have to think about it, even though it's a virtual world, it's still like getting mail bags of mail. So first of all, you want to make sure that you do your research and figure out whether a literary agent or a publisher is interested in your type of material. And nowadays, there is no excuse not to find that information. I mean, they can look at Jeff's guide, Jeff Herman's guide to book publishers, editors, literary agents. I realize this isn't his call in his interview, but you go to Publishers Marketplace, you can find out who does what. So that's first line. Once you know who you're going to submit to, you do want to look at their submission guidelines, and you want to try to find or identify a person if you can. First step is a query letter. You don't want to send a book proposal in the first submission. It starts with a query letter, then you have to be invited to the party. But what a lot of writers do, even today, is they will try to test the waters and they'll send a query, but they will not have a book proposal prepared. And if that happens, you may find that, it's a competitive business. If you have something really amazing, you may find that more than one agent wants it. They're going to contact you. You're going to say, I don't have this book proposal ready. Give me a week. And they're going to go on to the next thing. Because the way that the publishing works is literary agents work on commission. Publishers gain reputation by discovering great books. And it's a very fast-paced decision-making process. So you want all your ducks in a row. And when I first started writing, my first mentor, not my spiritual mentor, but my writing mentor, he said, your book proposal almost has to be better than your book ever will be. because maybe you'll have an editor to help you. There are another thing that I talk about in this book is I talk about alternatives to traditional publishing, because every day publishing houses are becoming bigger conglomerates, and they're trying to buy each other. I believe there was just a lawsuit where one publishing house couldn't buy the other publishing house because it would have been a monopoly. So, but they're trying, and it's always in flux. And if this material only has a small audience, doesn't mean that's bad. If you reach your audience, you're doing your job, and and it'll build. And there's a lot you can do to build a whole career around your book. But you may want to look for alternatives to the traditional publishing route, and still maintain the highest standards, because to the book buyers, you're still competing against the books that are published by the big five. So you want to do everything professionally. And one of the lessons that I talk about is self-protection. People perceive writing and getting published as a glamour field, and it's really good to see your name in print. That opens you up to a lot of scams. So you have to do your due diligence and really learn, what am I getting for my money? And there are many very wonderful author services companies that will give you a very professional book. Then you find people to help you promote it. But I'm hoping to give enough information in this book that at least what questions to ask, because it could be the Wild West out there.
That is so key, is giving, in many ways, this is such a valuable guide because of the fact that you're covering all of that. And you're addressing some of the things that people don't know, they don't know.
Exactly.
They think, oh, I'm going to sit in my cabin in the woods and I'm going to write my opus. And then they're going to come banging on the door, just, trying to get at it. And really, this world has changed so much. So being aware is oh so important. And you do a fabulous job of that, Deborah. Before the time runs out, can we talk a little bit about other spiritual topics? Because you do so many. Right. And we only got a few minutes, but you do animal communication, and you do intuitive readings. You do energy drawing. So I'm going to throw that at you. What do you want to tell us about quick?
Well, I love the animal communication because it's funny. I'm best with horses. I don't know why, I just connect with them, and I'm on to my second horse that I don't ride because he's like a big dog. But I learned a lot about animal communication and wisdom through my two horses. Dogs are hilarious. A lot of times they will complain about their owners and things that they don't quite like. And like, I want this or I want that. Of course, you don't have to listen to them. But the interesting thing too about dogs is they're so in tune with their humans that it's like they'll bust them. They'll tell me things about them. Like, I've had a dog pull his owner across the street to get me to tell her to stop worrying about the dog so much because it was making him nervous, because she was worried because he used to have Lyme disease or something. But he said, I'm fine. I'm going to be here a long time. Tell her to quit worrying. And cats, of course, are exactly what you would expect. One time, I'll just give you this quick story. Do we have time for a quick story?
You've got 15 seconds, but go.
Okay, well, cats will start off a conversation with, I don't like you.
That's very cat.
It's true. So anyway, but I really am blessed to to have some of these gifts. And some of them are funny, but they are also, because I use them to try to help people
And I think
navigate this world.
And that is so important. Okay, Deborah, tell people where they can go to find you online, maybe check you out on social media and learn a little bit more about that animal communication and the energy drawings, and of course, where they can go to find your book.
SoulOdysseyBooks.com. And the book is everywhere books are sold. So you can find it, and I hope you enjoy it.
Fabulous. Deborah, thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us on the Books That Make You show. You can find out more about us on our website. It's booksthatmakeyou.com. We are also on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, of course. Make sure you ring the bell, subscribe so you never miss a show. And, of course, on TikTok. Until next time, all of my bookish buddies, please enjoy all of the books that make you exactly who you are.
The host and executive producer of the Books That Make You show is Desiree Duffy. Sound mastering and engineering by Dave Napox. Social media and content promotion by Siddhi Jahagirdar. Copywriting and editing by Mike Robinson. The Books That Make You show is an award-winning podcast produced by Black Chateau Enterprises.